For a backhand rip, the key is to avoid simply pushing forward before rotating your forearm. Watch, if you hit straight through, the rip will go into the net. Okay, let's look at the arm mechanics of the backhand rip. Many students are very concerned about getting the frame of the backhand right. First, let's talk about the backhand drive. Just copy this form. For the drive form, the first requirement is the backswing. You cannot pull your arm back like this. This causes you to lift your elbow. Watch, if your elbow is high, you'll end up brushing the side of the ball. Having coached over 2,000 students, we are extremely familiar with these common issues in our teaching system. For your backhand drive, your elbow must point downwards, and the racket head should point to 10 o'clock. 9 o'clock is here, 6 o'clock here, so 10 o'clock is here. With your elbow down, the backswing position should be around the height of your belly button. Why do amateurs have poor form? They often drop their hand too low. Because they stand up tall, they have to reach down to get behind the ball. This is related to your center of gravity, you need to adjust it. So, you must keep the racket in front of your navel, with the elbow pointing down and the racket head at 10 o'clock. This applies to both shakehand and penhold grips. Second, during contact, you need to know what drives the backhand stroke. It's the forearm. It's just the forearm, push forward, then externally rotate. Just these two steps. I don't make contact back here in my backswing position. I must move forward to meet the ball first. After I push forward and make contact, at that very moment, I use external rotation. That is the backhand drive. Many players wait for the ball to come to them and then try to brush it. That's the biggest problem. Why do so many players have a poor sense of spacing? It's because you wait for the ball. Or you rush it. My feeling is this: as soon as the ball hits the table, and the rhythm for topspin is easy to find, the moment you hear that bounce, you start your swing. As you prepare here and swing forward, you'll meet the ball in front of you. Then, using your elbow as a pivot, you externally rotate your forearm. The wrist stays stable. This creates a textbook backhand drive. It's a two-part system. First, a parallel forward push to meet the ball. And second, once contact is made, a quick external rotation of the forearm around the elbow. That completes the backhand drive. The wrist remains stable. Now let's talk about the rip. The rip is very different from the drive. For a rip, the starting position is more to your left. For a drive, the racket is centered on your abdomen. For a rip, your hand is centered on your abdomen. A centered racket only allows a forward drive, while a centered hand creates a looping arc. With your hand at your navel, the racket is naturally more to your left, right? A drive is here, a rip is here. Second, for a rip, the racket head must be dropped. It can't be at the 10 o'clock position. The relationship between your hand and elbow is like a seesaw. If one is high, the other is low. If the elbow is high, the hand can be low. If both are low, it's very awkward. If both are high, you'll tire out after 2 shots. Therefore, your elbow should be at about chest height. During the backswing, your wrist must be lower than your elbow. If the wrist is higher than the elbow, you can't create friction. Watch, you can only drive or punch the ball. You can't add much spin that way. It's impossible. Keep the elbow high and wrist low, like a pro. We used to train with a 20 kilograms weight on our elbow for 5-minute sets just to build the strength to hold this position. You also need this strength. This is very demanding for amateur players, so we'll lower the standard. But you still have to hold it. Bring the elbow to chest height and make sure your racket face is below the elbow. This is incorrect. This is correct. Just slightly lower. The racket head, for both penhold and shakehand, must be lower than your wrist. That's the second point. Third, the biggest difference between a rip and a drive is that I must create an arc. For example, if I start at 8 o'clock, I have to swing towards 9 o'clock. If you imagine a clock face, my swing has to follow an outer arc. Because it's a circle, I start at 8, go to 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, and so on. The length of the arc is up to you. For a backhand rip, the key is to avoid simply pushing forward before rotating your forearm. Watch, if you hit straight through, the rip will go into the net. A truly good rip. Let me show you a couple of nice ones. Watch closely. They all have a clear arc. I'll do it slowly. Watch my racket head. You can imagine it moving in an arc, like a fan. A drive is different, as I said. A drive is a forward push, then rotation. For a rip, because the racket starts to your side, you are pushing forward and swinging in an arc at the same time. Watch the racket head. Even if I'm only using my fingers to create the wrist rotation, there's still an arc, right? That's how my shot generates spin. If your racket moves straight forward, you'll hit the net immediately. Hitting the net leads to a vicious cycle. You'll compensate by lifting with your arm, which causes the ball to go long. Many players' backhands are inconsistent, sometimes in the net, sometimes long. You can't rely on it in a rally. You're afraid to attack topspin because you fear a change of placement and your backhand isn't stable. So remember, to generate friction on your backhand, the racket head must move like the hand of a clock. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. I need to make the racket head rotate. See, by making the racket head rotate, I can generate spin. That's how this ball gets its spin. If the racket head doesn't rotate and you just brush it, you're very likely to make an error. It's the same feeling pimples players get when the ball slips on their rubber. That's the feeling, an unexpected ball into the net. Let me answer a common question from amateurs: does the wrist move or not? For any impact-based shot, the wrist should be stable. For a shot like this drive, the power comes mainly from the forearm. But for any friction-based shot, like a banana flick, a regular rip, or a loop, does the wrist move? Yes, it does. But what is responsible for that movement? The wrist doesn't move on its own. It's activated by the fingers. If I just swing my wrist freely, my shots will be very inconsistent. But when I use my fingers, the range of motion is naturally limited. This finger-driven wrist action is the key to creating concentrated, explosive power without losing control. My wrist cannot generate movement by itself. It only moves when driven by my fingers. If the fingers don't move, and this includes serves, the wrist won't move. When the fingers move, the wrist moves. Because the ball is so light, even a tiny, uncontrolled wrist movement like this will cause an error. Therefore, my wrist movement is always initiated by my fingers. Look at this friction, this arc, it's all coming from the fingers. It's about using that inch of power from your fingers. This is a skill that creates a high-quality, heavy spin ball. That ball has a ton of spin. The same applies to the backhand. All friction is initiated by the fingers, which then drives the motion. It comes from here, not from independently moving my wrist. In a match, if your footwork is slightly off, it'll just be like this. The wrist itself does not generate power. A wrist moved by the fingers has a natural stopping point, it's a snap. It's all about that instantaneous, maximum intensity friction. That's how it's done. Any shot with friction must involve the fingers, and the wrist must move in coordination. Because that moment of contact, though it seems instantaneous, is part of a full swing. Swing, friction, follow through. During that instant of friction, at such a high speed, how can you grip the ball? It's all thanks to the fingers. If you start snapping your wrist at the moment of impact, the range of motion becomes too large, making it impossible for your fingers to engage and create friction. Finger power is easy to understand. When you push, your arm moves forward like this, right? So your fingers push the racket forward in the same way. When looping a backspin ball, my swing path is upward. So, my fingers will apply force in that upward direction. The backhand motion is like this, so my fingers apply force in that same direction, coordinating with the direction of my arm's power. You absolutely must not just flap your wrist, even on your serves. You can't get good spin that way. Only when the fingers drive the wrist can you generate real spin, because the friction is concentrated. One last point, let's talk about the principles of the backhand. Actually, for professional players, pimples are easy points. I would much rather play against pimples than another inverted player, because the spin from inverted rubber can be unpredictable. The spin from pimples is much more predictable. The main weakness of pimples is heavy spin. So for inverted players, I have 3 pieces of advice. First, for all you inverted rubber players, you must learn to use your opponent's pace in backhand rallies. What does that mean? In a match, when the ball comes, don't do this. This type of big swing is for practice drills only. You won't have time for that in a real match. Instead, you must learn to do this, use their pace. Use your opponent's pace more in rallies. Don't back away from the table. If you retreat, your backhand will always be weak. The farther back you are, the better your technique, footwork, friction, and power needs to be. How can you manage all that? You see the top players now? They are all at the table. They rarely back up. Even Fan Zhendong plays much closer than he used to. Second, you must learn how to play a high arc, spinny loop against backspin. Against a backspin ball like this, hitting a powerful drive is just for show. In a real match, the ability to bite the ball and create heavy spin is what's most important. A heavy spin loop to the backhand is very difficult to block, unlike to the forehand. Pimples players also hate this shot. Most Pimples players have it on their backhand. It's rare on the forehand unless they twiddle. So you must have the ability to generate heavy spin. This is incredibly important. Don't just try to smash every ball. Finding the right distance on the backhand is the hardest part of the game. What's the third point? Every backhand player must have a reliable shot down the line. Let me tell you why my backhand is pretty good. It's because whenever my opponent gives me a ball that's even slightly wide, I will attack their forehand. If your backhand can threaten both corners, it will never be a weak link. If you can only hit backhand cross-court, then your backhand has a weakness. If you always worry about covering your forehand, your backhand will suffer. So, to have a strong backhand, you must have a shot down the line. A punch is fine too. When I was younger, I used to do this little punch block all the time. Just a small tap like this. As I got older, opponents could return that shot, so I started using a counter rip with their pace instead. The punch is also effective. It's a small, snappy motion, and the ball comes off a bit heavy and awkward for the opponent. Remember my 3 points. First, learn to use your opponent's pace in rallies. Second, against backspin, loop with heavy spin. Third, have a reliable shot down the line. If you can do these, you'll have a major advantage in backhand exchanges. Because most players' ability to change direction from backhand to down the line is very weak. Don't worry too much. Practice these 3 things, and your backhand will be very strong.